How's it going, Giants fans? My name is Alex with my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo, and today we want to discuss Eric Ebron, who recently worked out for the New York Giants, a potential tight end competition here with Ricky Seals-Jones and Jordan Akins, while Daniel Bellinger, our fourth-round rookie, rehabilitates from a quad injury that placed him on the physically unable to perform list. But the idea of signing Eric Ebron is interesting. I have some thoughts for it and some thoughts against it, and why the Giants may consider doing so. Of course, they didn't sign him yesterday after bringing in a couple guys for a workout, but we will discuss who they did sign, a familiar face from a couple years back, and they did release 4 players. We will discuss them as well. But Anthony, before we dive into the good stuff, how are you today, my friend?
I'm doing great, and I think it's really important for the Giants right now. They're kicking off training camp, getting their little depth pieces in order, right? Just going on the free agency bargain bin and having some tryouts, finding some guys that could potentially provide some depth to the roster. I think it's good that the Giants are recognizing now early where they might need to add some depth. Safety was definitely one of those positions, and we're going to talk about the safety that they signed. Tight end is absolutely one of those positions, and I do think that Eric Ebron makes a lot of sense for the Giants and is somebody that they should potentially consider signing, considering the lack of depth that they have at tight end. I don't know about you, Alex, but I'm not totally sold on Jordan Akins and Ricky Seals-Jones being the starting tight ends for the 2022 season. I was really hoping Daniel Bellinger could have a great summer and propel his way into the starting lineup, but now that he's dealing with an injury, that's another big question mark there. So I do think there's an overall lack of depth at the tight end position and at other positions as well on the Giants roster, but it's good to see that they're working those kinks out right now.
It definitely is. And let's discuss Eric Ebron first and foremost. Brought him in for a workout. Obviously, a guy who's had some success in the NFL. He's currently 29 years old, 6'4", 253 pounds. Played for Pittsburgh the last 2 seasons, 15 games in 2020 and 8 games in 2021, but ultimately didn't really make an impact last year. Only had 84 yards and 1 touchdown. But his biggest season, best season, Pro Bowl year came in Indianapolis back in 2018. Guy was an absolute monster. When it came to scoring touchdowns, had 13 touchdown receptions and 750 yards receiving with 66 receptions and a 60% catch rate. So obviously that was his best campaign. He has fallen off significantly since then, has some pretty significant drop numbers to go with that. But, we'll discuss that in a moment. But Anthony, when you're looking at Eric Ebron, what are the pros to signing him and what are the cons in your opinion?
I think one of the pros is just adding depth, right? He's a veteran. He's been in the NFL for 8 years, so he's been around. He's played for 3 teams, I think, at this point. Yeah, the Lions, the Colts, and the Steelers, 3 teams. Giants could be his fourth. Just some veteran experience to have in the tight end room, which I think is important. Of course, I know Jordan Akins, Ricky Seals-Jones, those guys are veterans as well, but the depth that you just can't be hurt by having more depth here. The Giants just need more depth. So that's just an obvious pro, but you could probably say that for pretty much any tight end in free agency. But I do think with Eric Ebron, when you look at his stats, he's only, 2 years removed from his career year. So it hasn't been that long since he's actually been a solid player. Now, I understand one of the cons is that he's coming off of an injury. He had season ending knee surgery in 2021 after playing in only 8 games and starting in only 3 of them. But when you look back, 2018, 19, and 20, he was still a very solid starting caliber player. 2018 was that career year, but 2020, just 2 years ago, he did post 558 receiving yards with 5 touchdowns. So not bad by any means. In fact, compare that to the statistics that Evan Engram put up this last season, and you're going to say that he's a much better player, or at least a far more productive player. So Eric Ebron has been a good player recently. It's not like it was so long ago that he was a good player. I mean, he's not like an ancient dinosaur amongst our midst. He's no Dave Gettleman out here. He is only 29 years old, and he's only in his 8th season. Players are still very productive at the age of 29, and Eric Ebron could be one of those productive veteran players that the Giants could pick up here. But the big question mark is, and the big con to signing him that you just mentioned, Alex, is the fact that he is coming off of season-ending knee surgery. So will he be able to get back to 100% and return to form, or at least return to the 2020 form that we saw him with the Steelers? I hope so, and I think that that's a possibility, especially hoping for that if he's signed by the Giants. But there are some question marks. Now, Eric Ebron did say that he is at 100%. He did say he is healthy and ready to go for the 2022 season. And I'm sure that's true because I don't think that the Giants would be having him in for a tryout if they didn't believe that he was healthy to go for the 2022 season. So I do think it is worth looking at Eric Ebron and saying, hey, if this guy is healthy, he could provide quality depth to the Giants tight end room. This is a guy who has been a starter for many years in the NFL. There are other veteran tight ends out there, though, who have also been long-term starters that could make sense as well. I wrote an article last week about Jared Cook, who's also a free agent right now. Everybody knows Jared Cook. He's been very good for a very long time, but he just had a really productive year with the Los Angeles Chargers, and now he's sitting available as a free agent, and that's kind of questionable. I think there's a lot of tight end talent out there on the free agency market, and I do think as the Giants look to bulk up the depth on this roster heading into August, I do think there are going to be some signings made. I don't think this is the final wave of signings for the Giants by any means. I do think there is a tight end out there on the market that makes sense for them.
Yeah, and if you like tight ends that drop footballs, you probably love Eric Ebron. Evan Ingram. I saw actually a pretty funny video today of him dropping a pass with the Jaguars in practice. Literally, like, it's very simple little zig route right to his chest, drops the ball, and everyone's freaking out. It's absolutely hilarious. Signed him to a $10 million deal to drop footballs. Now, Eric Ebron, on the other hand, he drops a lot of passes too, my friends. He dropped 14.3% of his passes last year, and he dropped 9 passes in 2020, 5 in 2019, and 7 in 2018. Again, he had 122 targets in 2018 during his best season, but last year, 9, I guess he dropped 2 passes, but 9 drop passes and 96 targets. Definitely not ideal, but, a guy that would probably be our tight end 1 immediately. I don't really know if I trust Ricky Seals-Jones or Jordan Akins, but again, like, how good is Eric Ebron? He barely played last year, and Pat Freiermuth is the only other tight end for the Steelers. So, if you're going to bring in Eric Ebron, he's going to be competing for starting snaps. And I think that Daniel Bellinger is going to be healthy pretty soon. I don't think this is a long-term injury. And I think that they view him as the prospective starter. Like, I think they want him to start as a rookie, first year of a rebuild. They want to get him that experience, in my opinion. I think they want to get him involved. And if Eric Ebron suddenly is in the mix here, I think it may actually hurt his playing time. So, I don't exactly know if that logic makes any sense, but Eric Ebron, in my opinion, we don't necessarily need him. Like, how much better is he going to make this offense? Probably negligible amount. So I think it's probably not necessary to sign him. More of a depth piece. If I was going to do that, I would not be signing him to start him. I'd be signing him to compete. And not just hand over a starting job like Anthony kind of attested to before. But the Giants did also make a couple of other moves. And a big one that just kind of dropped a couple of minutes ago is Azeez Ojulari was placed on the NFL or NFI list to open camp. So he is a tweaked hamstring. It's a minor tweak. So I don't really think that it's going to be like a long-term thing. He has, experience from last year. So ultimately I do believe that this is going to be kind of a short-term situation for Ojulari with the hamstring injury. Probably will spend a couple of weeks rehabilitating, make sure it's nothing too serious, not aggravating him. What is your reaction to the Azeez Ojulari news? Because definitely not ideal to have a guy of that magnitude injured before camp even starts, similar to Kayvon Thibodeau, especially when they haven't even gotten any action really yet. So definitely sucks, but I think it should be kind of a minor thing that won't take too long to rehabilitate from.
Well, I'll say you did mention Kayvon Thibodeau, so I'll be the bearer of good news. Kayvon Thibodeau is not on any of the injury lists. No PUP, no NFI, nothing. He is fully healthy and ready to go for camp, which we can all be excited for. But his partner in crime, Azeez Ojulari, as you mentioned, is on the NFI list. A little tweaked hamstring. And according to Jordan Rannon and the other guys, the other beat reporters, they're saying it's nothing major. This shouldn't be something serious. They just don't want to aggravate it. Don't make it any worse before the season opener. The season opener is all the way in September. We've still got all of August to get through. There's plenty of time for Azeez Ojulari to get healthy and get into the practice mix at training camp, but there's no need to rush him back while he's still recovering from an injury. He's just got a little tweak in the hamstring. That's not a huge deal. There's plenty of times where you see players, they pull a muscle and they're back in 2 or 3 weeks and they're at full strength. And that's probably going to be the case here with Azeez Ojulari. But there's also times where players tweak something, pull a muscle, they get back into the action that same week and they pull it again, make it worse, and then sometimes they'll even tear it. That's what you want to avoid with Azeez Ojulari because you know how impactful of a player he can be for the Giants this upcoming season. So it's very important for the Giants to just be careful with all of their young players, all of their starters, as they have been since mandatory minicamp. You saw, of course, Sterling Shepard, who's on the PUP list, but you saw Sterling Shepard, you saw Kenny Galladay, Kadarius Toney, Kayvon Thibodeau, all these guys running around practicing in red jerseys. And most of those guys are off of the red jerseys and now able to participate in training camp and fully healthy and ready to go. But had they been participating in a mandatory minicamp, Who knows? Maybe they pulled something. Maybe they aggravated an injury, made it worse, and maybe they're not suiting up for training camp today or tomorrow or any of the other days of this week, right? So I do think the Giants are taking the right approach, the patient approach here with all of their injured players, and I think that's exactly what's going on here with Azeez Ojulari. I don't think this is a serious injury. In fact, I think that if there was a game this upcoming Sunday, he'd probably be able to play. That's the vibe that I'm getting from this injury, but there's no need to rush him back for a training camp practices. That's really just pointless to me to try and rush somebody back and risk the extra injury. So I think the Giants are making the right decision here.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, we can find one big positive. Kadarius Toney and Kenny Galladay and Saquon Barkley, none of these guys are on the physically unable to perform list. Daniel Jones with a neck injury last year. There's a lot of guys that I thought might start on that list that are seemingly healthy. So I think we've escaped pretty much the major ones here. Azeez Ojulari being on the non-football injury list is what it is. He'll be okay. It's a minor hamstring tweak. They don't want to rush him into it. They want to give another guy maybe that just extra roster spot, someone to compete while he comes back. Whatever it might be. So there are some things that do play a part in this entire equation. But I'm pretty excited to see what this training camp kind of unfolds in the position battles that do happen here. So the Giants did sign a couple players yesterday, 4 guys in specific. Andrew Adams, who spent the first 2 years of his career with the Giants in 2016 and 2017. He spent the last 4 years with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He won a Super Bowl there. He made 14 appearances last year, totaling 24 combined tackles and 4 passes defended. Now they also signed defensive tackle Nick Williams, 6'4", 300-pound interior guy. They released Jabari Ellis, a defensive tackle that was with Detroit. I think he was with Baltimore last year. And then Williams played the last 2 years with Detroit, played in 17 games last season at 31 years old, 27 combined tackles and 4 tackles for a loss with 2 quarterback hits. So some production there, a lot of experience under his belt. They signed wide receiver Marcus Kemp, formerly of the Kansas City Chiefs, has some, chemistry, and he knows Mike Kafka. So it makes sense. They brought in a familiar face there. He made 16 appearances last year. I expect him to compete with the special teams unit. And they did bring in offensive tackle Kamal Seymour, guy that hasn't played an NFL game, was placed on the non-football injury list last year by the Las Vegas Raiders. Now the Giants did release Corey Cunningham recently, so kind of replacing that tackle spot with Kamal Seymour. And they did release Henry Black, defensive back, Travis Toivonen, a wide receiver, and defensive back Maurice Kennedy, former Baltimore guy who probably they just wanted to see and kick the tires on. See what happens there. So Anthony, hearing about some of these guys, I guess notably Andrew Adams, a guy that we know a lot about from his time with the Giants. How are you feeling about some of these roster moves?
I think most of these moves are going to be moves that you don't even give second thought to. In 2 months from now, you're not even going to remember that they were made. Probably a lot of these guys that are getting signed right now aren't going to stay on the team come September, right? So, but Andrew Adams is a player that I think has a chance of staying on the team come September because I do think that he is quality depth. Now, again, with Eric Ebron, we were talking about him and the potential of him being quality depth for the New York Giants at the tight end spot. Safety spot also needed some depth. Of course, your starters in terms of Xavier McKinney, in terms of Julian Love, most likely, Dane Belton, but really who else behind those guys? It's not really some prominent names, nobody notable that you really take notice of and say, hey, they are a good player. They could step in and, when their name is called, you can rely on them. Andrew Adams, though, I feel like over the past few years of his career has been that player that when called upon has delivered in really good situations with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So if you're looking at Andrew Adams and what his career has looked like, of course, he is a Super Bowl champion. He's like, I believe it's one of 2 Super Bowl champions on the New York Giants roster currently, and the other one is Tyrod Taylor, if I'm not mistaken. But he spent the last 4 years of his career with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he did play in 2021. He played in 14 games. He did have an interception. He did defend 4 passes. Of course, in 2018, his career year with 9 defended passes and 4 interceptions and 4 starts. So he is a very productive player. He has been on the field for significant playing time during his time in Tampa. He's never been a clear-cut starter over in Tampa, but he's been one of those guys that gets rotated in as an extra defensive back, maybe in those nickel packages. And I think that's what he could be for the Giants as well. Granted, he is getting up there in age. He might be starting to slow down. Maybe he's not the player that he once was over in Tampa, but I do think his familiarity with the New York Giants is something to take note of. And I do think that Andrew Adams could be a quality depth piece in the secondary. He is a good safety. I'm not saying he's a great starting caliber player, but he is quality depth. And I think that's what the Giants are looking for at this stage in the offseason. We're gearing up. Training camp is kicking off. We're going to have preseason in just a few weeks. Really, all the Giants need to do now is just fill out the back end of that roster, find depth guys that you can rely on in case anyone gets injured. And I do think that Andrew Adams can be that guy to step in if someone gets injured and give you quality snaps.
Agreed. I think that he is a guy that has experience. He's played in MetLife before. He just won a Super Bowl 2 years ago with the Tampa Bay Bucks. He knows what a good defense looks like, and having that type of experience, I think, is essential towards success. So these are the moves. 4 guys the Giants did sign, the 4 guys they cut, plus a little bit on Eric Ebron and maybe what he could bring to this team if they decide to give him an opportunity with a contract. But guys, would love to hear perspectives below in the YouTube comments about Ebron, about these guys they signed and cut. If you have any thoughts, would love to hear them. As always, make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Giants episode.